Greetings moviegoers, and welcome to another annual Top 10 Movie Countdown. By now, you probably heard about the Oscar nominations and would really like to hear what I thought were the very best films that came out last year, right? Well, too bad. You get to hear what I absolutely hated from 2014. Keep in mind, I have not seen every film that came out last year, so if a film you truly dislike doesn't make an appearance on my list, it's either because A, I didn't see it, or B, didn't think it was all that bad. With that said, let's start things off with the ones that were lucky enough to miss the cut of my top 10 list with my dishonorable mentions. In alphabetical order, they are Annabelle, the rather unsuccessful spin-off of The Conjuring, Adam Sandler's vacation comedy romp Blended, the Americanized remake of District B13, Brick Mansions, the long-awaited and unwarranted sequel to Dumb and Dumber 2, The Expendables 3, the continuation of Stallone and Company's saga of testosterone-fueled bullshit, Into the Storm, the poorest poor man's twister if I ever saw one, A Million Ways to Die in the West, the uninspired and unfunny follow-up to Seth MacFarlane's Ted, Ouija, the year's second worst Hasbro movie, Paul W.S. Anderson's disaster epic Pompeii, and finally, the Bayified reboot of everyone's favorite Heroes in a Half Shell, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, with those out of the way, let's move on to my top 10 worst films of 2014. Number 10. I, Frankenstein.
That's Frankenstein.
This bland and forgettable film pits the infamous rejuvenated corpse from the classic Mary Shelley novel up against the same type of dark, comic book stylized setting as the Underworld franchise, where he faces off against demons, gargoyles, and the withering acting talents of Jai Courtney. This movie could have been enjoyable in a so bad it's good guilty pleasure sort of way, but it doesn't even go that over the top to elicit unintentional bursts of laughter. It's just a very generic action film laced with mediocre performances, really bad special effects, and it's just a complete bore to watch. If there's any goodwill to be found from it, it's that you will immediately forget all about it not long after you pop it into your Blu-ray player. Number 9. The Legend of Hercules. Now this is a film that could be easily enjoyed on a guilty pleasure level, right? Not even close. The effects are much worse than my last pick, the acting even more stale and wooden, and the overall style and direction of the film makes it look like one of those cheaply made movies you see on the Sci-Fi Channel. Which leads me to question, how on earth did this movie get a theatrical release in the first place? Whatever the reason, just do yourself a favor and skip this hunk of dookie altogether. Otherwise, you're gonna wind up coming out of it feeling disappointed! Number 8. Devil's Due. We've certainly had our fair share of found footage horror movies over the years, and it seems as if this style has run its course with a large majority of moviegoers, at least with this genre. So why does Hollywood keep making them despite the onslaught of negativity? Isn't it obvious?
We've got to have money.
This movie encompasses everything I hate about the horror genre nowadays, from the amateurish filmmaking style to the amount of thrills and suspense it fails to generate. If only we had more films like The Babadook taking care of the genre instead of films like Devil's Due, at least then I'd sleep better knowing there's still a number of talented people out there who actually give a shit about scaring me shitless. Number 7. Tammy. I wouldn't consider myself the world's biggest Melissa McCarthy fan, but I do find myself disappointed in seeing her being typecast in these roles that cater towards the lowest common denominator. But I wouldn't blame McCarthy for all the movie's wrongdoings too much, unless of course she's the one who wrote it that way, in which case, she's the ultimate reason why this movie sucks so much. It's another unfunny exercise of meandering plot structure and cringeworthy behavior that the only laugh you'll most likely get out of it is the simple fact that it's being passed as a comedy. Melissa, we love you, but please do us all a favor and don't write any more screenplays, at least for a while. Number 6. Horrible Bosses 2. Now if you thought Tammy was an annoying mess, then this movie is the basic equivalent of scratching your fingernails on a chalkboard while standing on a fiery pit laced with barbed wire and broken glass.
Jesus.
There is not one genuinely funny moment to be found in this picture, not even so much as a chuckle. It's essentially a movie that suffers from what many refer to as the hangover effect, with Hollywood taking something as satirically clever as the first Horrible Bosses and rummaging it into the ground with a terribly thought out sequel. If there's one thing this movie got right, it's that it lives up to its own title, which is horrible. Number 5. Vampire Academy. Thankfully, the vampire craze has slowly started to die down, especially after the conclusion of that wretched Twilight saga, but it certainly doesn't help when movies like this appear out of the blue with its own rabid fanbase already set in place. It tries to be like every other vampire monster soap opera that panders to the teenage demographic, but with a dash of the sassy and quirky mannerisms of Juno, but fails on such an epically miserable level. Plus, they had already made that movie, only it was called Jennifer's Body. And you know what? It didn't even work in the first f***ing place! So for all those hardcore fans out there still trying to petition for a sequel to get greenlighted, get used to disappointment. For in a few years' time, no one will even remember that this movie existed at all. Number 4. Sex Tape. It's a little funny to note that a movie about a couple trying to contain a leaked private video file was released by the same studio currently undergoing an almost eerily similar process, but that's aside the point. The main point is, this movie sucks. Big time. Sure, it's supposed to be this R-rated raunchy comedy for adults only, but it plays out more like a very tame PG-13 movie made for immature adolescents. Only I've seen a lot of PG-13 comedies out there that had a lot more edge than this asinine pile of human excrement. Oh, and the next time you announce that you're going to feature someone as hot as Cameron Diaz completely exposed in their birthday suit for the first time ever, actually deliver on your promise. Because I can assure you, most of us did not pay good money to see this just to count the hair sprouting from Jason Segel's ass crack. Just saying. Number 3. God's Not Dead. Christian cinema, for the most part, had been skeetering towards mediocrity for about as long as anyone could remember, and yet the films themselves never go beyond being nothing more than harmless entertainment. That is, until we arrive at God's Not Dead, a poorly acted, lazily written, and disgustingly manipulative piece of religious propaganda devised not only to sell more Newsboys albums and, oddly enough, Duck Dynasty merchandise, but to brainwash younger viewers into thinking that everyone who does not share in their own beliefs is automatically an amoral scumbag. That's a horrible message to send to younger viewers. It really is kind of sad to think that this is supposed to represent the very best of the Christian community, when all it does is reaffirm what people already know, without even making the slightest attempt to challenge their beliefs. God may not be dead for some viewers, but his movies lately are in desperate need of some divine intervention. Number 2. Maleficent. Disney has kept a pretty good track record when it comes to their most recent animated outings. Their live-action films, on the other hand, not so much. Giving a backstory to arguably one of Disney's greatest villains is one thing. Changing their entire evil persona? Unacceptable! I've already talked in great detail in my initial review for this film, so I'll just conclude by saying that this was one of the worst reimaginings of an iconic character that even Maleficent herself would find generally appalling.
A disgrace to the forces of evil.
I'm sorry you feel that way, but you seem to be taking it rather well. Holy shit! And the #1 worst film of 2014 is Transformers: Age of Extinction. Yeah, you knew this was coming. The latest entry in Michael Bay's seemingly never-ending franchise was without a doubt the single biggest waste of time I experienced from 2014. I could go on yet another angry tirade on all the stupefying problems regarding the film's stale set of characters, rehashed plotlines, and 17-hour running time, but instead I'll just say that after having sat through all 4 of these tired, repugnant, and needlessly excessive toy commercials, now seems like the best time for myself to call it quits in terms of viewing any more of these cinematic crapfests. Because life is just too short to be wasted on something that has and always will continue to move backwards, and I for one have had enough of this abysmal franchise. And those were my picks for the absolute worst films of 2014. Do you agree or disagree? Leave a comment below and tell us which were the films you dreaded the most from last year. Stay tuned for my top 10 best films of 2014 list, which should be coming up real soon. But until then, I'm the host, and thanks for watching.